This Sunday, rising risks. More U.S. forces head to the Middle East as markets tumble and oil prices rise.
This war has been won.
And uncertainty grows over President Trump's next move in Iran.
We negotiate with bombs.
We can achieve all of our objectives without ground troops.
Is the U.S. seeking a diplomatic deal or preparing for a ground war?
They are begging to make a deal, not me. In the meantime, we'll just keep blowing them away.
My guest this morning, Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma and Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Plus, holding pattern. House Republicans reject a Senate deal to fund the Department of Homeland Security as airport security chaos and safety concerns grow.
This gambit that was done last night is a joke.
And public pushback.
No justice, no peace. No ICE in our streets.
Tens of thousands across the country take to the streets to protest the policies of the Trump administration. Joining me for insight and analysis are NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell, New York Times White House Correspondent Tyler Pager, Republican strategist Sara Fagen, and Adrienne Elrod, former senior advisor to the Harris campaign. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. As the United States marks 1 month of war with Iran, new details emerged late Friday of more U.S. service members injured, this time in an Iranian attack on a Saudi airbase. 13 U.S. service members have been killed and more than 300 wounded since the conflict began 4 weeks ago. All of it comes as President Trump considers sending thousands more troops to the region and continues to leave open the possibility of putting U.S. boots on the ground. Meanwhile, the status of negotiations between Washington and Tehran remains unclear.
We think there will be meetings this week. We're certainly hopeful for it. Ships are passing. That's a very, very good sign.
We've had an exchange of messages and indications from the Iranian system, whatever's left of it, about a willingness to talk about certain things. We're waiting for further clarification about who is it that we would be talking to, what will we be talking about, and when will we be talking.
Adding to the uncertainty, President Trump's original 48-hour deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz has now slipped twice, first to 5 days and now to 10. With no clear end and no obvious off-ramp to end the war, markets are feeling the strain. The Dow Jones and Nasdaq both entering correction territory this week. And globally, the price of oil hitting $112 a barrel, up 55% since the war began. Meanwhile, President Trump continues to insist Iran is begging to make a deal.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal. I say they're lousy fighters, but they're great negotiators. They are begging to work out a deal. They want to make a deal. The reason they want to make a deal is they have been just beat to.
And joining me now is Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Senator Lankford, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Hey, thanks for having me back again. Good Palm Sunday morning to you.
Good Palm Sunday morning to you. Thank you for being here. I want to start off by talking about the war with Iran, Senator. President Trump continues to insist that the United States is winning. Take a listen to a little bit of what he had to say this week.
Let me say, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won.
I think we've won. We've knocked out their Navy, their Air Force. We've knocked out their anti-aircraft. We've knocked out everything.
This war has been won.
Senator Lankford, do you agree with President Trump that the United States has, in fact, won the war?
We are won or winning. There is no question about that. The major features of this was to be able to stop their production of ballistic missiles, of one-way attack drones, to be able to take out their capability to attack Americans and our allies in the region, to be able to stop their nuclear program development, to be able to halt that, and then to be able to try to take down their Navy so that they can't endlessly shut down the Strait of Hormuz over and over again. Obviously, there is still work to be done. It's not over by any means. But if you want to talk about the military objectives, just about every one of those objectives have been hit and have been hit early.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit, and let's start with the regime that is in power because, of course, the supreme leader was killed. It's believed his son has taken over, and arguably more hardline than his father even was. Is it a victory for the U.S. if the war ends with this regime still in power, Senator?
Well, to be clear, we've yet to see the new supreme leader anywhere in public or to make any kind of public statement, so we're not sure 100% about that yet. But the administration's focus has been very clear. This has been about taking out their nuclear program, stopping their terrorism, their ballistic missile program, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz permanently. We're going to have to work with whatever leader is there. Iran is not going to bring in Thomas Jefferson to be able to lead Iran, though it'd be great to be able to see that for the people of Iran to be able to have that kind of freedom. It will be a different type of regime than what we would select here in America, but it will be important for us to be able to have at least someone who's not trying to kill us every day. Remembering that for 47 years, this regime has been attacking Americans at every opportunity they can possibly get, whether it's Marine barracks in Lebanon, whether it's Houthis attacking just ships randomly coming across their coast. Iran has been focused on trying to be able to carry out their acts of terrorism. Every base that we have in the region there is a base there because of the threat of Iran. This is not a new threat. This has been a threat for almost 5 decades now, and President Trump has just determined it's going to stop. You're going to stop trying to threaten and kill Americans.
Let's talk about the missile program. You raised that. Reuters is reporting that the U.S. can only confirm the destruction of about a third of Iran's missile arsenal, which is significantly less than the 90% or more that the administration says that it's destroyed. Do you think it's a victory if the war ends with less than 100% of Iran's missile program destroyed?
Yeah, there's a difference between the missiles and the missile launchers. We've been actively going after missile launchers. You can't launch a missile if you don't have the launcher itself. So the focus from the administration from the very beginning is, yes, taking out their production capability for missiles and all of their industrial infrastructure for that, but taking out one by one the launchers so they can't actually launch these missiles at us and our allies.
As you know, there's a lot of discussion, Senator, about what exactly is going to happen next. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that he believes it is possible to meet all of the military objectives without putting U.S. boots on the ground. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, it's hard to be able to tell. We should be able to do that for what the American objectives were and still remain. That is taking out their nuclear program, stopping the terrorist threats on it, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz on it. But I would tell you the president's actually bringing ground troops. He's got 5,000 Marines coming in. He has the folks from the 82nd Airborne. He is creating contingencies to put pressure on Iran to be able to finish the negotiation, to say we are capable of doing more and doing what the United States military alone in the world can actually do. So I don't fault the president for being able to put additional pressure on Iran, saying come to the table, let's get this done. No one wants a war, and you certainly don't want to battle against the United States of America, the strongest, most moral fighting force in the world. So I think the president's right to be able to put troops in the area and to be able to ratchet up the pressure on Iran to make a deal.
Well, let me follow up with you on that point. The Wall Street Journal announcing they could be preparing some 10,000 troops to be deployed to the region. Would you support the president putting U.S. boots on the ground in Iran, Senator?
Well, that is a different story. We've got to be able to know what the objectives are and what they're actually carrying out. So to be very clear on this, the worst thing that can happen is to be able to have this kind of conflict start and to not end it, to leave it undone. We've got to be able to finish this. Again, almost 5 decades, Iran has been attacking Americans at every single chance that they have at any moment through their allies in the region, through all these terrorist proxies that they have in Iraq, and all the way through Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They're going to continue to be able to come after us until we make them stop. The focus here is to be able to stop them from attacking us and to make sure it does not restart again.
So you say it is a different story when we're talking about U.S. boots on the ground. Let me ask you bluntly, Senator, do you believe President Trump would need congressional approval if he, in fact, does want to put U.S. boots on the ground in Iran?
if we have a long-standing war that's happening, go back again to what happened in Iraq or in Afghanistan, yes. If this is to protect Americans and to be able to make sure that we're in there for a season and we're stopping and getting out, that's very, very different. So again, this is all contingent. It's an interesting question to be able to talk about on the political side, but really the focus needs to be on how do we make them stop attacking us. That's the main focus. The president has the authority to be able to prevent someone from attacking us. That is what he's doing right now. If we're going to have a long-standing occupation, that's a very different issue. But I don't think that's even what President Trump is even talking about. We're not trying to be able to go in and to be able to occupy the country or to be able to have a long-standing, long-term war. No one wants to see that. So I'm looking forward to us getting this mission complete and getting out of there.
I just want to put a fine point on what you're saying, though. You are not ruling out supporting the president putting U.S. boots on the ground if he deems that necessary.
That depends on what boots we're putting on the ground in that sense. If this is special forces to be able to carry out a specific operation, get in, get out, that's very different than long-standing occupation.
Okay, you talk about Congress's role. I want to play a little bit of what President Trump said this week as it relates to congressional oversight. Take a look.
We have a thing called a war, or as they would rather say, a military operation. This is for legal reasons. I say military because as a military operation, I don't need any approvals. As a war, you're supposed to get approval from Congress, something like that. So I call it a military operation.
Do you agree that as long as President Trump calls it a military operation, he doesn't need congressional approval?
No, I would say the people of Iran believe this is a war. There's no question about that. The key focus will be when the supplemental request comes in for additional funding from the White House to say, okay, we need additional funding to be able to carry forward. That's the moment that Congress always engages. So this moment is about protecting the American people that have been under attack from Iran and its regime for decades now. When additional funding request comes in, Congress will have to speak at that moment to be able to talk about how far, what the plans are, what we're going to do. Just to put one other fine point, America's problem is not with the Iranian people. It's with the regime that is dominating the Iranian people right now. They've killed tens of thousands of their own people. They dominate them. They cut off the internet. They cut off all access to the outside world. They crush protesters. They hang teenagers for protesting. I mean, this is a brutal regime that hates its own people and dominates its own people, much less what they're doing to the rest of the world. So it is a good thing to be able to have someone to step in and to be able to stop them from attacking us, but it also leaves an opportunity for hope for the Iranian people to one day live in peace.
Let me ask you, the administration is temporarily waiving sanctions on Russia and Iranian oil to try to ease the supply shock the war has caused. I want to play for you something that President Zelensky of Ukraine had to say to R.F. Sanchez about what the sanctions relief means to Russia from his perspective. Take a look at this exchange.
But now, if sanctions are lifted and he will get more money, much more money, he will put this money to the weapon.
Is President Putin the big winner here with this sanctions relief by the Trump administration?
No, President Putin's certainly not the big winner here. He's a dictator and a thug in that area, and he's is brutally attacking his neighbors. One of the things that the United States and President Trump has taken out is the ability for Iran to be able to provide these one-way attack drones to Russia. Remember, Russia's major weapon has been these one-way attack drones provided by Iran. So the United States has taken out those production facilities so Iran can't provide weapons anymore to Russia. To be clear, the sanctions that were lifted on the oil were the sanctions that were on ships in the water. President Trump's trying to be able to manage a global shock to oil prices worldwide, while we're also trying to be able to take out a terrorist regime in Iran. This is a very difficult balancing act.
But Senator, do you support lifting those sanctions against Russia, what President Zelensky sees effectively as a reward for Russia?
Right. It's not a reward for Russia by any means. What President Trump is trying to do is to be able to deal with just trying to be able to get oil that's already on the water. So no, President Trump is not unilaterally lifting sanctions on Russia. They have a tremendous number of sanctions on them, and they should have a tremendous number of sanctions on them. They are a brutal regime.
Senator, I do want to move to this funding fight on Capitol Hill. The Department of Homeland Security isn't being funded on Friday. The Senate unanimously, I don't have to tell you this, passed a measure that House Republicans rejected. It would have funded DHS. It wouldn't have funded ICE and CBP. Why aren't Republicans on the same page about how to reopen the government?
Yeah, this is a difficult issue on it because we're dealing with Democrats right now that do not want to fund ICE and CBP. They want to go back to our open borders. They don't want to have enforcement in the interior of the country.
But the Democrats did support the Senate measure, Senator. They did support the Senate measure.
They did support the Senate measure, but you remember there wasn't any new funding for ICE or for CBP. Now, I would tell you, Kristen, last summer in the One Big Beautiful Bill, we actually included additional funding for ICE and CBP. We pre-funded ICE and CBP because we knew there'd be a day that Democrats would not want to fund ICE or CBP at all. So last summer, we pre-funded them completely for the next 3 years so that we would not have a moment like this. The DHS funding bill for the last 5 years has been the hardest bill to be able to pass through Congress. It's been blocked over and over and over again by Democrats. We knew this was not going to get easier, so we pre-funded all that money. So when we got to the negotiations and at the end of it and couldn't make progress and everything, we determined, okay, we're going to just use the funding we've already set aside last summer to be able to fund ICE and CBP for the rest of the time, but let's get everything else in DHS open. What Democrats were asking for ICE and CBP on their quote-unquote reforms were absolutely absurd. They asked for things, for instance, like ICE could not be at polling places. Well, if you're not legally present, you shouldn't be voting in America, but Democrats were demanding that ICE agents would not go to a polling place. They were demanding body-worn cameras, which we were fine with, and said, yes, absolutely, let's add funding for body-worn cameras. Then they brought back language and said, well, the body-worn cameras the footage can only be used to be able to prosecute agents. They can't be used to actually prosecute anyone else on the film. That is, anyone else that would actually be not legally present in the country. There were so many different standards different rules they tried to put on everything that made it unreasonable, even limiting where Border Patrol could even function in the country, limiting to a very narrow strip right along the border and saying that's the only place Border Patrol can go. It has been a very, very frustrating negotiation. We just want to get DHS back open again.
Senator, just to be very clear, though, the Senate vote was unanimous. It seems like Republicans are not on the same page here. But let me ask you big picture, because you're a member of both the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees. Federal officials have been warning about the war with Iran, creating a heightened threat environment in this country. Republicans are in charge of all three branches of government. Given that and the strain on airport security caused by this shutdown, is air travel and airport security safe right now?
It is safe right now because we have a lot of great patriots that are working in Homeland Security that are working for no money at all right now. They'll be paid at some point, but they're not being paid right now, and that's incredibly frustrating. But those patriots that are still out there serving, they're doing the hard work to be able to protect the nation, but we've got to get this back open again. We have thousands of folks that are on furlough, and one of our frustrations, one of the things you mentioned, we're in a conflict with Iran right now. Yeah. We need the cybersecurity professionals at their desk, and they're currently not being funded. We need to get those things funded. By the way, I've got a bill that ends government shutdowns forever. You and I have talked about it before. This is a bipartisan bill. I believe we have enough support in the Senate right now. We want to move this to the House. But I believe that we should never leave Washington, D.C. until everything is funded. But we should never get to a moment we're not paying federal workers. The simplicity of that bill is pay the federal workers, make sure everything's taken care of on the programs, but members of Congress are in session 7 days a week until we solve the funding issues. That should be the way we actually solve this. My focus is we should never, ever have government shutdowns on any of these areas.
All right. Well, Senator James Lankford, thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, Democratic Senator Cory Booker joins me next. Welcome back, and joining me now is Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. He's the author of a new book, Stand. Senator Booker, welcome back to Meet the Press.
It's so good to be back on. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you back on. Let's dive in and start talking about the war with Iran. The U.S. has reportedly sent Iran a 15-point plan addressing its ballistic and nuclear weapons program, and some analysts have already drawn some comparisons to the talks under the Obama administration, the deal that was struck during the Obama era. Do you support the Trump administration's efforts to try to negotiate a deal with Iran to bring this war to an end?
I don't support this administration, period. They've gotten us into what will be looked at as one of the greatest blunders, presidential blunders of our time. Remember, this president had stated objectives, none of which he is achieving right now, from the nuclear program all the way to, frankly, regime change. The regime is more extreme. They've shown an asymmetric ability to choke up the Straits of Hormuz, has caused a global oil shock. And for Americans at home, our costs continue to rise. This is after the president has cut people's health care and nutrition programs. And now with over $25 billion that has been spent on the war, over 300 people injured, 13 Americans who've lost their lives, this president is pushing us further and further into a conflict with no foreseeable off-ramp and thousands of more troops moving into that region. And he still has not come to Congress for any kind of authorization for what is clearly not just a war, but the biggest military engagement we've had since the war in Afghanistan. This president is off the chain, and we are in a global crisis of his causing.
Well, let me ask you, you talk about the regime being more extreme. I wonder, at least 40 senior Iranian officials have been killed, as you know. The son of the late Ayatollah Khamenei, now reportedly in power, although, as you know, there are questions even about that as well. Do you think it would be responsible for the United States to walk away with hardliners still in power? Do you want to see the U.S. stay and try to effect regime change?
Well, so this is the quagmire that he's gotten us into. He has stated an objective of regime change and now put us in a position where we have a more extreme regime. My colleague and my friend Lankford talked about, hey, we went in here to stop terrorist attacks on Americans. Well, we're seeing Iranian proxies from Iran to now the Houthis in Yemen causing more attacks. And we're in a situation now where we have degraded their near-term military combat capabilities. But remember what we learned from Ukraine is we are now in a state of war where in garages, in basements, people could be putting together drones for just a mere thousands of dollars that could cause serious harm, as we've seen just yet another attack on our base where Americans were severely wounded. So what is the administration's plan? This has been the problem from the start. He did not consult with Congress. He did not come and make his case to us or the American people or strategic allies in the region. This is a president that is failing this moment and making matters worse for Americans. He's a man of chaos and corruption, and we're seeing that now on a global scale.
All right, let's talk about the funding fight over the Department of Homeland Security. As I was just discussing with Senator Lankford, there was a bill that passed the House. It would have funded DHS, but not ICE and not CBP. Democrats are demanding changes to the way ICE operates, requiring judicial warrants before immigration officers enter homes, banning their use of face masks, just to name a few. Those measures were not a part of the Senate deal. Senator, will this shutdown have been a failure if Democrats cannot secure those changes to ICE policies?
Well, again, I just want to continue to emphasize that we are seeing a colossal failure in presidential leadership, because this president has said again, I have the power to pay TSA agents and I'm going to do that. Why didn't he do this weeks ago when we started seeing the suffering of folks at the airports? And remember, this fight has never been about TSA.
But what about what Democrats are asking for, Senator? So far, it's not a part of any of the legislation that's being considered in either chamber.
Yeah, we've had a unanimous agreement to do what Democrats were saying from the beginning. Pay TSA and not let ICE have another dollar when they're reckless and out of control in our neighborhoods around the country. We came to that deal. The Republicans capitulated. We unanimously passed that out of the Senate, and the Republicans rejected it. So yeah, I don't want ICE, mass people jumping out of unmarked cars, slamming Americans to the pavement, barreling into their homes without sufficient warrants. I do not want ICE running into and around our churches, our schools, our hospitals, our courthouses. And yes, I don't want ICE showing up at our polling places, doing the kind of things we've seen video after video of them doing. So that's why I'm not funding. I'm not going to vote for another dollar. And we finally out of the Senate got them to come to their senses and say, Don't hold TSA hostage. Don't hold FEMA hostage. Pay them. We got that out of the Senate, and now the House Republicans saying, no, we want to continue this chaos at our airports until you come around and just give us more money for this out-of-control, reckless reckless ICE agency that's in our neighborhoods and our communities.
Senator, this has been the longest partial government shutdown now in U.S. history, come on the heels of the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Is there still a path for Democrats to secure those key demands that you are asking for in this round of negotiations, or do you not see that as realistic given this standoff?
Well, again, we know that presidents can bring parties together and solve problems. This is the president who's bragged about being the great deal maker, but he is not focused on Americans. He's not focused on their rising costs. He's not focused on the pain at the pump. He's not focused on the problems that he is causing. He's involved in a war of monumental proportions that's shocking the globe. He is not focused on America first. And we are seeing the chaos of this president visit the world and visit Americans' lives. Look at what's happening to our airports. This is presidential failure that is actually growing because we in America are seeing the real costs of a president like this. American soldiers dying abroad and Americans at home paying more and more from their health care costs to their fuel costs. Enough is enough. This president needs to be brought to account. And the problem is Republicans in Congress are refusing on any of these issues to provide meaningful checks and balances. They're not providing the oversight that is needed at this crisis in our country.
Senator, let's talk about your new book. I have it right here, Stand. I'm going to read a little portion for everyone. You write, quote, "We cannot cancel everyone who fails a purity test. We cannot exile those who don't ally with our every belief, however passionately we hold it. Coalitions that are only composed of the already converted cannot change the country. If everyone in your coalition agrees with you on everything, your coalition is too small to make big change and too small for what our democracy demands." Do you believe Democrats are making the mistake of shrinking their coalition with what you describe as purity tests, Senator?
Look, I'm proud of so many things that my Democratic colleagues are doing, but as a whole, our party has failed this moment. It's why I've called for new leadership in America. I've called for a generational renewal because this left-right divide is killing our country, and our adversaries know it. They come onto our social media and try to whip up hate in America. That is one of our biggest crises. It is time for a new vision of our country that's far more uniting, that brings people together, doesn't deepen divides. I really believe this is a time where we need new leadership, new moral imagination to pull our country together, because the challenges on the horizon aren't just this current crisis that Trump has caused. He shouldn't be the main character of our narrative right now. We have real challenges from new technologies like AI and robotics, new challenges that we need more unity in our country and a reminder that we are not each other's enemies. In fact, our ability to find common ground has always been our greatest hope.
Senator, I do have to ask you about your own political future. You recently got married to your wife, Alexis. Congratulations, first of all. You have said that she will play a big role in your decision about whether to run for president. So let me ask you, is she supportive, broadly speaking, of your running for president?
I think what she's supportive now is, number one, we both are excited about being married and hopeful for a family. But she knows what's at stake right now. The generations before us are great, her parents and her grandparents. But I think what she wants to do as a couple is for us just to play a role in whatever that is in the future of trying to get that renewal in a country where we begin to have Americans fully embrace the dream. In fact, as she and I talk a lot about in the coming months, we just want to be a part of a generation of Americans that helps to redeem the dream for all.
Sounds like you're saying she would be open to your running for president, so you're not ruling it out, Senator?
I am definitely not ruling it out. I'm running for re-election. I hope New Jersey will support me for another 6 years. But what I love about her is she knows as a partnership we are better than we were before we met, and I'm excited about whatever challenges we may take on as a couple.
Let me ask you, you have run for president before in 2020 on a message of love. It's the same message you had back in 2016. I want to play you a little bit of something that you had to say back in 2016. Get your thoughts about it today. Take a look.
I love Donald Trump. I'm going to say that. What? I don't want to answer his hate with hate. I'm going to answer it with love. I'm not going to answer his darkness with darkness. I love him.
Senator, do you still love Donald Trump?
I'm a Christian, and my faith is very clear. Love your enemies, love your adversaries. Never let somebody pull you so low as to hate him. That doesn't mean I won't fight him with ferocity, try to defend and protect people's health care and public education. But God bless America. Our Declaration of Independence ends with those profound words. If we're going to succeed as a nation, we must, quote, mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. He may be abandoning that ideal of sacred honor, but we need a return to it, an urgency to return to it in our country. Hate is going to tear our country apart. Tribalism is already making it difficult to do common sense things. Americans don't want leaders that will show how great they are at beating others down. They want a new generation of leaders that show that they can lift the whole country up. So yes, I will not hate my adversaries in Congress. I'll be doing a better and better job, I hope, of reaching out to people, pulling them together, and reminding them that in this American moment, the definition of our success ultimately will come down to, are we able to put more indivisible into this one nation under God?
All right. Senator Cory Booker, we thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And when we come back, President Trump delays his Iran threats. Is a deal to end the war within reach? The panel is next. Welcome back. The panel is here. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Chief Washington Correspondent Andrea Mitchell. Tyler Pager, New York Times White House correspondent. Democratic strategist Adrienne Elrod and Republican strategist Sara Fagen. Thank you to all of you for being here this morning. Andrea, I have to start with you in this extraordinary moment in the war. Here we are a month in. Yeah. President Trump is both talking about diplomacy on the one hand and at the same time readying troops on the other hand. What are your sources telling you, Andrea, about where things stand?
Well, in talking to people in the Gulf, to Arab leaders, they are telling the White House, do not do ground troops, that will change the whole nature of this. It will postpone what they are really hoping for at the end of this process, which is go in, make sure now that you've started, finish it. Don't leave Iran, hurt and wounded and still able to strike back against us. And try to restrain Israel from going after civilian targets. And regime change, because that is changing the mission and expanding the war. And then Iran is still able to retaliate against the Gulf states and against our civilian targets. We now have to rebuild ourselves. Lebanon is becoming a disaster. It's freaking out the Syrians. Yeah. So go after Hezbollah, but don't destroy Beirut, where there is 1.2 million people already displaced in Beirut. The Gulf leaders are saying, we're going to have to rebuild Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank, and it's delaying what you really want, which is the Trump-Abraham Accords, the transformation of the region. So that's what they're saying. U.S. officials say diplomacy is real, that there is some real progress. There were talks in Islamabad today. It goes beyond Pakistan. It's Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey. But there are no real negotiations. It's not trading proposals back and forth. It's overtures. The Pakistani chief of the army, the military power there, with people in the IRGC. And one of the problems is that the more leaders you assassinate, there really aren't, as the president said. Plus, the Gulf of Hormuz and the oil crisis is a lot more serious. We can talk about that in a minute.
Well, and the fact that it's prompted this energy crisis, Andrea, and Tyler, Andrea is making the point that on the surface, there are talks happening, but there are no real direct negotiations at those highest levels, in part because so many people have been assassinated. You, of course, have been writing about the 15-point proposal that the Trump administration proposed. What are you hearing about where these talks stand?
Yeah, absolutely. I was speaking with senior White House officials this weekend, and they've told me that it's more accurate to say talks than negotiations. And I think that is evident of really the early stages of where this is at. And on your question about these 15-point negotiations, one of the challenges is that these proposals are very similar to what the U.S. put forward before the war started, and the collapse of those negotiations has led to the conflict we're currently in. And so there's some in the administration that think that the president needs to authorize some more military action to tilt the negotiations and take away some of the leverage Iran has. One of the differences now is Iran has a lot of leverage over the U.S. because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which is causing this global energy crisis.
Well, and Sarah, when officials were briefing members of Congress, according to NBC News, there was a frustration, quite frankly, on both sides of the aisle that lawmakers weren't getting the information and, quite frankly, just answers that they needed from Trump administration officials about the strategy and about what happens next. Do you think this war is potentially causing a rift in the Republican Party?
Well, there's certainly a corner of the GOP that hates this war. But if you look at polling, they are strongly supportive of President Trump and the action that he's taken. And so I think that has been overreported. There's a few podcast hosts that have been loud, but generally the party is strongly in support of him. As you sort of look to the future, the question then becomes how long, how expensive, is there a ground invasion? And the constellation of those things, I think, could dramatically change how the party reacts to this. But right now, they're firmly in support of the president.
Well, and notably, Senator Lankford, when I asked him about ground troops, would he support it, he said, it depends, and signaled that would certainly mark a different phase of this conflict. Adrienne, Democrats watching this very closely. You obviously heard from a fiery Senator Cory Booker. How should Democrats be responding, given that, quite frankly, this is a crisis that could land in the lap of the next president who could be a Democrat?
Well, I think so far, Kristen, Democrats have been responding very effectively on this. Number one, they're holding Trump to account. Number two, let's also keep in mind that he gave a record-long 108-minute State of the Union address. He dedicated 3 minutes of that to the situation in Iran, and then several days later, we went into war. He could have primed the American people a little bit better for that, and I think Democrats are making sure that people are reminded. But I think also as we go forward, Sarah brings up a really good point. Right now, the MAGA base is with Trump on this. But I think at this point, unless things start to change, his poll numbers right now are about as high as they're possibly going to be when it comes to the war, and they are not high. So I think he only has to go down from here. And the real question is, how long does the MAGA base stay with him? I also think Democrats should continue to remind the American people how important it is to have our relationship with our allies. Because if this continues, we need to make sure that we do have a strong relationship with our allies. And Trump has only alienated our traditional allies in the Europe and NATO.
Well, I think that you look at the Gulf countries and they don't want this regime in power. This has not been a good situation for the Middle East. And we've been in a almost 25-year negotiation with the Iranians over their nuclear weapons. And so, I think there is an understanding by Republicans, particularly traditional Republicans, that this had to be dealt with. It was a matter of when. And so on that regard, Republicans will give him some leash.
And Andrea, it's a crisis you've been tracking for years. What we're seeing, though, is a global energy crisis.
It's a global energy crisis, the worst that we've ever seen, actually. And they are predicting, the people I'm talking to in the industry and in finance and in diplomacy say this is not going to end. This is not, quote, a blip, as the president called it. This is going to go for months and months and months, up to the midterms at this point already, because you're seeing a complete disruption of the supply chain. And it's food, it's fertilizer. Now, U.S. farmers, most American farmers, they're already planting, so they had already bought their fertilizer. But the head of the Global Trade Organization just warned in the last couple of days, this is a global food shortage. You're already seeing, by the way, that Sri Lanka has gone to a 4-day work week. Malaysia is telling people to work at home. Thailand as well, New Zealand. So you've got Asia already affected in profound ways. And right now, that does give, at least temporarily, Iran more leverage, because Iran has leverage over the Strait. And what we also saw is, importantly, the Houthis getting into this now. The first time the Houthis got into it, which could threaten the Red Sea, which is the Saudi back door. They're pipelining oil out.
Well, you're so right, Andrea, to point out that this is so much broader than just gas prices. Pause right there. We're going to come back. We have much more with our panel. But when we come back, the war with Iran, as we're just talking about, triggers an historic global energy shock. Our Meet the Press Minute is next. Welcome back. The war with Iran has triggered the largest oil supply disruption in history, threatening global supplies and hitting Americans hard at the pump. Concerns are growing it could echo 1973, when Arab oil producers imposed a total embargo on several countries, including the U.S., sending oil prices soaring nearly 300%. Vice President Gerald Ford joined Meet the Press to respond to the growing fears of a global depression.
It does seem to me that neither the producing nations nor the consuming nations are anxious to have an energy problem create an economic depression throughout the world. And therefore, it's in the best interest of both the producers and the consumers to sit down and find an answer. But of course, this answer may have to come with some solution of the problems in the Middle East.
Can you say whether the administration now regards the main problem facing the economy as being the threat of renewed inflation or the threat of recession?
I don't believe the administration feels that the main problem is a recession. Even with the oil problem or the energy crisis, the predictions are not dire, they're not serious as to the economy.
And when we come back, the funding fight in Washington continues as Republicans split on Capitol Hill and airport lines grow. More with the panel next. And welcome back. The panel is still here. Tyler, let me kick it off with you because we got some new poll numbers for the president this week showing, again, new lows for him against the backdrop of this war, increased gas prices, and, of course, the ongoing government shutdown.
Yeah, it is certainly a tough moment for the president across many fronts, and we're seeing images not just of conflict in the Middle East, but these really long lines at airports across America. And I think one of the things that Democrats are trying to seize on is that Republicans control, both houses in Congress and obviously the executive branch. I think one of the things when I talk to White House officials is they say, the midterms are still far away and we still have time to adjust. But one of the challenges here is that some of these crises are not immediately resolvable. One of the big ones, obviously, with the Strait of Hormuz being closed and gas prices skyrocketing, that's not an immediate fix. Even if that reopens, it's going to take weeks or months for gas prices to come back down. And one of the things we've seen over the course of decades is gas prices are a barometer for how people vote. And the economy is often the main issue. And that's going to be a challenge for the president and the Republican Party as they move into the heat of the midterms.
And Andrea, it's that climate in which we saw these No Kings rallies yesterday all across the country. Tens of thousands turning out to voice their opposition to the Trump administration and its policies. Just put this into perspective for us. When you see these types of rallies, how significant is it? How much of a barometer is it for potential Democratic energy heading into the midterms?
Well, one of the things about these rallies are that they are now getting extra fuel, if you will, from the anti-war movement. And the anti-war movement includes a lot of independents and young people who otherwise might not be engaged. So this could energize the base more than just the Democratic base, but the independent base, which is so critical. And it can upset the MAGA base as well, depending on how long it goes. And again, inflation is a rising factor, affordability. And that is the economic question. This is not just gasoline. It's surgical gloves, other commodities, a lot of chemicals come through the Gulf.
And Sarah, of course, the government is shut down. You heard my conversation with Senator Lankford, Senator Booker. There doesn't seem to be any end in sight, but Republicans don't seem to be on the same page here about how to end it, and they're in charge.
Well, there's certainly, as we've seen, Republicans thought they had a deal, and the House the Senate Republicans had a deal. The House Republicans had a different idea. Look, I think that this is a really problematic moment, in part because, this was sort of squarely pegged on Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in terms of being the force for stopping funding of DHS and causing this. And now when you have a kind of Republican on Republican fight, it changes the narrative. And I think that in the most basic function of government, which is to be able to walk through an airport and go through screening in some reasonable amount of time, that is the kind of thing that lingers and causes incredible problems in a ballot box. And it's early enough that they can certainly recover from this. But if this goes on for months and months, coupled with the fallout from Jeffrey Epstein, inflation, a potential, long war, that is not going to be a great day for Republicans.
Adrienne, how do you see this unfolding?
Look, I mean, here's the bottom line. The Senate had a bipartisan deal. It passed 100-0. Mike Johnson came out, botched the whole deal, said I'm sending folks home for 2 weeks. This is squarely on Republicans. Why TSA has not been funded, why we are in this situation to begin with. And I want to say something really quickly on Andrea's point about independents, coming out and joining some of these No King rallies. We do know that independents are squarely against the war. So I think that the point that Andrea made about Democrats building this coalition that is going to carry us into the midterms, we've already flipped 30 state legislative races. The momentum is on our side. Democrats are in a good place here.
All right. Well, we'll see how it all plays out, guys. One more beat here. I want to thank you all for a great conversation, to our panel. But finally this morning, we do want to send off our dear friend and colleague, Peter Alexander, who is leaving NBC News after 22 years for a new adventure. Peter is woven into the fabric of NBC News, serving as our chief White House correspondent and covering 3 presidents over the past 15 years. He has truly set the gold standard for holding our elected leaders to account. Peter has also greeted America every Saturday morning as co-host of the Weekend Today show, Making Us Laugh, a role that I was so honored to share with him for several years. He's also sat in this chair when I was on maternity leave after my son was born. And in my house, we just call him Uncle Peter. We are so thrilled. Allison, Ava, and Emma will now have more time with him. Peter, this place will not be the same without you, my friend. We will miss you, and we will cheer you on every single day. That is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.